land of the Middle East has sustained civilization for more than 6,000 years. In fact, the river valleys of the Fertile Crescent and Egypt are considered cradles of human accomplishment. Nomads, shepherds, and later farmers lived along the rivers. For these thousands of years, the availability and distribution of water have meant the difference between life and death. And water continues to be the area's most essential natural resource. In a difficult environment, the need to discover, conserve, and divert water forms a common bond among all the peoples of the Middle East. The new high dam at Aswan provides flood control, energy, and irrigation to a wide area of Egypt. New villages and towns have risen, and a variety of crops are grown on land which was once considered uninhabitable. Still, the great majority of the people of the Middle East today are farmers who live in farming villages rather than on separate farms. Most of the population use farm techniques and tools which have changed little over the centuries. But recently there have been changes. The growing use of modern machinery and fertilizer are making additional land available for agriculture and increasing crop yields, such as wheat in Jordan. In addition, land reform has raised productivity in much of the Middle East. Agricultural experts advise small farmers, run experimental stations, and transplant olive seedlings to reforest the barren hills. Agricultural experiments have made it possible to grow crops on what was formerly desert dry land, as here in Israel, where less than 4% of the people live on a kibbutz, or communal village farm. Lying mostly in Asia, but partly in Africa and Europe, the area we call the Middle East was the world's first crossroads. The region has a varied environment. Many people think of it as desert. And while this is not entirely true, most of the land is too dry for agriculture. In the mountain areas, which are a chief source of water, diverse groups of people often found refuge from invaders and some have remained relatively isolated to this day. When rainfall was not sufficient, the people survived solely on the water from the rivers. Fertile land of the Middle East lies along the great rivers, near the coasts and in a few other areas. Here, agriculture was first practiced. Here, the world's first cities grew. And here, most Middle Easterners live today. The development of arts and crafts and a trading system which created markets and permanent settlements helped make the Middle East a center of creativity. In this region developed man's first alphabets and writing, law codes, insurance, coinage, calendars, systems of weights and measures, mathematics, and many other achievements. These great advances formed the base of much of Western civilization. The people are proud of their rich heritage, and these Iranian workers and engineers are restoring monuments of ancient splendor. From the ancient Middle East came the world's three great monotheistic religions, sharing many of the same holy places, a common Semitic background, and some of the same prophets. Judaism developed first and became the foundation for the two that followed. Today, Jews from all over the world come to pray at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Christianity followed, and Christians now visit holy places where Jesus was born, lived, and preached. Christianity has spread to the entire Western world. Today, in the Middle East, there are close to 8 million Christians of various denominations. In the 7th century, the Prophet Muhammad delivered the message of Islam in Arabia. In 1 century, the new faith had spread from Spain to the Indus Valley. Now there are close to 600 million Muslims in the world, and more than 1 million travel as pilgrims to Mecca every year. About 90% of all Middle Easterners are Muslims. They share with Jews and Christians similar and sometimes identical views about life, death, and creation. Most of all, they share a belief in the same Creator. Most Middle Eastern cities were established before the age of Islam. Here, the peoples of 3 continents met, traded, borrowed, and quarreled since the beginning of civilization. They grew as centers of commerce and government and have helped make the Middle East a center of contact, creativity, and diffusion. Some sections still retain an ancient and medieval flavor. Craftsmen and their apprentices have for centuries maintained the art of creating objects by hand. Government workshops are being established to help preserve these traditional skills. Next to the old parts of the cities of the Middle East are new districts, which have modern buildings, industrial plants, Western architecture, consumer goods, and lifestyles. In the Middle East, as elsewhere, the city dominates the rest of the country. All power is concentrated in the city, political, economic, cultural, and social. Most cities are overcrowded, and the population explosion is serious. There are far more people than jobs. Therefore, many are without work, are underemployed, or work for very low wages. "60 years ago, most of this area was part of the Ottoman Empire, and the change into more than a dozen independent states has been rapid. Political systems now range from democracies to constitutional and centralized monarchies to military rule. In many countries, the middle class is doubling every 10 years. It is these professionals with new values and attitudes who can implement more change. The cities have helped bring rapid but uneven social change to the Middle East. While the life of many, particularly the peasants, remains traditional, the lifestyle of the urban population is influenced by Western ways, creating a unique blend. Family life plays a central role in the overall social organization. Closeness and devotion within a family are strong and deeply rooted. Polygamy, not uncommon in the past, is rarely practiced today. Television reaches most inhabited regions of the Middle East. It forms and transmits new ideas and offers entertainment in an era of increased leisure time. As the Middle East heads for the 21st century, there are serious problems to be solved and more changes ahead. Immigration to and construction and growth within the new state of Israel have been impressive. But ever since the establishment of the first Zionist settlements, there have been explosive confrontations between Arabs and Jews. After World War II, the area became a haven for displaced Jews from Europe. But after the formal establishment of Israel in 1948, open warfare erupted often, killing thousands and creating millions of homeless refugees. Israelis claim that the Holy Land is theirs. They point out that even after the destruction of the temple, Jews who remained there and those who were dispersed wanted to reestablish a Jewish state. Palestinians say that they have lived there for more than 1,000 years. Some trace their roots to pre-Islamic times and want to return to their ancestral land. The Middle East is the major oil-producing area in the world. Much of the world's known oil reserves are in Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Production and revenues are vast, making them among the richest countries in the world today. The oil-producing countries have become aware of their power. They have set out to create a balance between cheap oil and costly imports, and to develop their countries. Their control of production and influence on pricing dramatically affect the economics of every country in the world. Other economic and industrial changes are taking place. Modern factories are being built. Industrial growth has been diverse, as in the transportation and communication industries. For example, an aviation maintenance center in Lebanon repairs and rebuilds planes from countries all over the world. A busy dockyard in Israel keeps the small country supplied with material goods. Both comments on the Middle East's continuance as the world's crossroads. Cairo's film industry is one of the world's largest and improves communication by producing documentaries and feature films for the entire Arabic-speaking market. To help speed industrialization, Middle East governments have contracted with American, Soviet, European, and Japanese firms to build new industrial plants. This growing industrialization requires an ever-increasing number of skilled laborers. Technical schools are desperately needed. Only 3% of Middle Eastern students are enrolled in either vocational or technical schools. The role of women is changing in every nation in many different ways. Most young women now receive some formal education, though its form varies widely from country to country. In some schools, co-education has existed for a long time, while others remain strictly segregated. For most children of the Middle East, the chance to get into school improves every day. New schools are being built and illiteracy is decreasing. The urban population has the easiest access to schools. A recent change is the availability of compulsory elementary education and free secondary education to the young people who will soon be deciding the Middle East's future. Today, as in the past, the Middle East is made up of people of varied religious, ethnic, economic, and political groups. Can strength and unity emerge from this great diversity? The area remains a place where great powers struggle for control, and smaller nations strive to determine their own destiny.
واضرب علي